Emma Carter stared at the pharmacy receipt in her trembling hand while the fluorescent lights above her buzzed like angry insects. Formula. Diapers. Infant fever medicine. $83.40. Her checking account held $11. Outside the 24-hour pharmacy, rain slid down the windows in crooked silver streaks. Somewhere near the back aisle, a tired toddler cried while an exhausted mother whispered promises she probably wasn't sure she could keep. Emma understood that kind of whispering. She stood near the baby supplies section holding a can of hypoallergenic formula against her chest while mentally rearranging bills she already couldn't pay. Rent was 4 days overdue. The electric company had sent another warning email. Her son Noah's daycare balance was so behind that the director had stopped sounding polite during phone calls. And Noah had developed another rash from the cheaper formula. Emma closed her eyes briefly. Not now. Please not now. Her phone buzzed. A text from her landlord. Need payment by Friday, Emma. I can't keep extending this. Her stomach tightened. The shame was worse than the poverty sometimes. The constant explaining. The apologizing. The calculations. The way every conversation became about money. At 29, Emma had once imagined a completely different life. She used to work as a billing coordinator for a private medical transportation company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep her apartment warm and her refrigerator full. Then the company had been acquired during a massive restructuring deal involving Hayes Medical Systems. Alexander Hayes's company. Within 3 months, half the administrative staff had been eliminated, including her. She still remembered the HR woman avoiding eye contact while handing her the severance packet. Operational efficiency adjustments. That was the phrase. Operational efficiency. As if people's lives were excess inventory. Emma shifted Noah higher against her shoulder. The little boy slept restlessly beneath his faded blue blanket, his forehead still slightly warm from the fever that had kept both of them awake most of the previous night. She hadn't slept. More than 2 hours. Her hair was tied into a messy knot. Her sneakers were damp from walking 6 blocks through rain because bus fare mattered now. Everything mattered now. Even a $3 coffee had become something she mentally justified for 20 minutes. Emma looked down at her phone again. She opened her messages. James, her older brother, the only person she still occasionally asked for help. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she typed, I hate asking again, but Noah's formula is almost gone and he can't keep the cheaper kind down. Could you lend me $40 until Friday? I'll pay you back after my shift. She stared at the message. Humiliation burned through her chest. At some point, survival stopped feeling temporary. That was the frightening part. The way hardship slowly became your personality. Emma hit send before she could lose courage. Then she grabbed the formula and headed toward the register. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed. She expected James. Instead, the message read, I just transferred the money. Where are you? Emma frowned. Wrong thread. Her exhaustion suddenly sharpened into panic. She checked the number carefully. 1 digit off. Oh my God, she whispered. Another notification appeared. You okay? Then, the amount probably wasn't enough. I sent more. Her banking app refreshed. $500. Emma nearly dropped the phone. The pharmacy line moved around her while her pulse pounded loudly in her ears. Who sends $500 to a stranger? Another message appeared. You're not answering. Did something happen? The name at the top finally registered. Alexander Hayes. Emma froze. The Alexander Hayes. CEO of Hayes Medical Systems. The same man whose face appeared in business magazines inside grocery store checkout lanes. The same company responsible for the layoffs that had destroyed her stability. The same corporation that bought smaller healthcare companies, cut jobs, consolidated systems, and called it innovation. Her throat tightened. This had to be some mistake. Her fingers trembled as she typed. I'm sorry. Wrong number. I meant to text my brother. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, do you still need the formula? Emma stared at the screen. Rain hammered harder against the windows. Noah shifted weakly against her shoulder. The cashier called for the next customer. And despite every instinct telling her to walk away from this conversation, Emma whispered softly, yes. By the time Emma left the pharmacy, the rain had turned the sidewalks into black mirrors reflecting smeared city lights. She clutched the paper bag tightly beneath her coat while balancing Noah carefully against her chest. Her phone buzzed again. Where are you? She stopped beneath a flickering street lamp. This was insane. Absolutely insane. She should block the number. Delete the conversation. Go home. But another message appeared before she could decide. You sounded scared in your text. Emma swallowed. People usually ignored fear. Or exploited it. They rarely noticed it. I'm fine, she typed. A pause. Then, that usually means someone isn't fine. Emma almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because she suddenly felt dangerously close to crying in the middle of the sidewalk. She leaned against the brick wall of a closed laundromat while Noah stirred again. Shoo, she whispered, rubbing his back gently. A low fever. Congestion. Another pediatric visit she couldn't really afford. Another copay. Another prescription. Another balance added to the growing pile on her kitchen counter. The silence stretched. Then another message appeared. You shouldn't be outside with a sick baby in this weather. Emma frowned. How do you know he's sick? You bought fever medicine. She blinked. Then remembered. The pharmacy receipt notification. The transfer included a message field. For formula and medicine. Her chest tightened unexpectedly. Not because of the money. Because he'd actually paid attention. Most people didn't. Most people move through the world without really seeing struggling women carrying babies through rain at midnight. They looked away. Emma typed slowly. Why are you helping me? The response took longer this time. Because someone should have helped sooner. Her breath caught slightly. The answer felt heavier than it should have. Not flirtatious. Not performative. Tired. Like regret. A black SUV turned slowly onto the street. Its headlights cut across the wet pavement before stopping several yards away. Emma's body immediately stiffened. The rear passenger door opened. A tall man stepped out wearing a dark overcoat, charcoal trousers, and the kind of quiet composure wealthy men carried without trying. Alexander Hayes looked older in person. Not older in age. Older in the eyes. Tired around them. Controlled. Like someone accustomed to carrying pressure without showing it. He glanced around the street before his gaze landed on Emma. And for one brief moment, something shifted in his expression. Not pity. Recognition. Of exhaustion. Emma immediately took a step backward. You shouldn't have come here, she said. Alexander stopped several feet away, careful not to crowd her. You texted your location. I didn't think you'd actually show up. A faint breath escaped him. Neither did I. Rain tapped softly against the hood of the SUV. Noah whimpered quietly against Emma's shoulder. Alexander's eyes lowered instinctively toward the child. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. How old? He asked. 10 months. He has a fever? Emma nodded cautiously. Pediatrician says it's probably viral. Alexander studied her face. The dark circles. The soaked sleeves. The defensive exhaustion. You haven't slept. Emma stiffened. You don't know me. No, he said quietly. I don't. Something about the honesty disarmed her more than charm would have. He looked toward the pharmacy bag. Did you get everything you needed? Most of it. What does that mean? It means diapers can wait until next week. The words escaped sharper than intended. Alexander nodded once. Like he understood more than he wanted to. A cold gust of wind swept through the street. Noah coughed weakly. Alexander glanced toward the SUV. There's a cafe around the corner still open. Emma immediately shook her head. I'm not getting into your car. Good. She blinked. You shouldn't. That surprised her. Alexander adjusted his coat slightly. I'll walk. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and wet wool. A college student wiped tables near the window while quiet jazz played overhead. Emma sat stiffly in the booth furthest from the door, Noah sleeping against her chest while steam curled from untouched tea beside her. Alexander sat across from her. Not crowding. Not interrogating. Just there. That somehow made her more nervous. Men with power usually demanded space. Attention. Gratitude. Alexander Hayes simply watched her carefully like he was trying to solve something painful. Emma pulled Noah's blanket tighter. You do this often? She asked finally. What? Rescue random women from pharmacies. His mouth twitched slightly. No, then why tonight? Alexander looked toward the rain-streaked window. For several seconds, he didn't answer. Then, because I know what it looks like when someone's drowning quietly. Emma stared at him. The answer sounded too personal. Too immediate. She folded her arms. You're the CEO of a billion-dollar company. And people like you don't usually notice people like me. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not anger. Something heavier. They should. Emma looked away. You laid off 600 employees last year. Alexander became very still. The air between them changed instantly. Emma hadn't planned to say it, but exhaustion stripped politeness from people. My company acquired North Valley Medical Transit, he said carefully. I know. You work there. Yes. Silence. The espresso machine hissed in the background. A spoon clinked against ceramic somewhere near the counter. Emma felt foolish immediately. What was the point? He probably didn't even remember the acquisition. To men like him, it was paperwork. To her, it had been survival. Alexander leaned back slightly. When were you terminated? 3 weeks after maternity leave. His jaw tightened. Emma noticed. You didn't know? She asked. I don't oversee individual termination lists. Convenient. The word landed harder than she intended. Alexander accepted it without defensiveness. That doesn't make the consequences less real. Emma looked at him sharply. Most executives hid behind language. Efficiency. Optimization. Economic necessity. He sounded guilty. Alexander rubbed a hand across his jaw. When Hayes Medical expanded that division, I was told layoffs would mostly affect duplicate executive roles. Emma laughed softly. A tired laugh. They always say that. He didn't argue. That somehow felt worse. Noah stirred again with a weak cough. Emma immediately checked his forehead. Alexander watched her carefully. You do that every few minutes, he said quietly. What? Check his temperature. Emma shrugged. He had RSV 2 months ago. Something flickered across Alexander's face. Fear. Quick, but unmistakable. He was hospitalized? For 4 days. You handled that alone? Emma nodded. His father? The question wasn't judgmental. Just careful. Still, Emma's shoulders tightened. Gone. Alexander didn't press. But she saw him noticing the wedding ring indentation still faintly visible on her finger. A habit. She still twisted the absent ring when anxious. The divorce had been finalized 7 months earlier. Aaron had left before Noah turned 3 months old. Too much stress. Too much responsibility. Too much crying. That was how he explained abandoning them. As if fatherhood were inconvenient weather. Emma stared into her tea. You know what the worst part is? She asked quietly. Alexander waited. The poverty? She shook her head. It's becoming invisible. He looked at her carefully. I used to think struggling people look different somehow. But they don't. They stand in grocery stores counting coins while everyone avoids eye contact because it makes them uncomfortable. Her voice cracked unexpectedly. Emma swallowed hard. I used to be normal. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Alexander's expression changed instantly. You still are. No, she laughed weakly. Normal people don't panic over formula prices. Emma. She looked up. The way he said her name startled her. Not intimate. Grounded. Like he was trying to pull her back from somewhere dark. My mother used to cut her blood pressure medication in half to afford groceries, he said quietly. Emma blinked. What? We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above a hardware store when I was a kid. She stared. That's impossible. No, his mouth tightened slightly. It's just not part of the version people prefer. The cafe suddenly felt quieter. Alexander looked toward the sleeping baby. She worked double shifts until she collapsed at work when I was 14. Emma watched him carefully. There wasn't enough insurance coverage, he added. A pause. She died 6 months later. The grief in his voice wasn't dramatic. That made it worse. Old grief, settled deep, usually sounded calm. Emma looked down slowly. I'm sorry. Alexander nodded once. Then he surprised her. I built Hayes Medical because of that. Emma frowned slightly. To fix healthcare? That was the idea. And he looked exhausted suddenly. Companies become systems. Systems become numbers. Somewhere along the way, he stopped. Emma finished quietly. You stopped seeing people. Alexander met her eyes. Yes. Silence settled heavily between them. Not comfortable, but honest. And honesty was rare, especially from powerful men. When Emma finally returned to her apartment nearly an hour later, Alexander carried the pharmacy bag upstairs despite her protests. The building smelled faintly like mildew and old cooking oil. A broken fluorescent bulb flickered in the hallway. Someone argued loudly through thin walls 2 floors below. Emma suddenly saw everything through his eyes. The peeling paint, the stained carpet, the exhaustion. Humiliation crawled up her throat. You don't need to come inside, she said quickly. Alexander glanced toward Noah sleeping against her shoulder. You can barely keep your eyes open. I'm fine. You've said that 3 times tonight. Emma unlocked the apartment door. The tiny apartment was clean but painfully worn. A second-hand couch. Laundry folded carefully in baskets because the dryer downstairs cost extra. Late notices stacked beside unopened medical bills. A leaking faucet ticking steadily in the kitchenette. Alexander stepped inside slowly, and Emma saw the exact moment he understood. Not aesthetically, not romantically, actually understood. This wasn't quirky struggling. This was survival. Noah began crying weakly as Emma laid him carefully into the portable crib near the couch. She immediately moved toward him. Alexander stood awkwardly near the doorway. A billionaire in an expensive coat watching a tired woman warm formula at midnight in a cramped apartment. The contrast should have felt ridiculous. Instead, it felt strangely sad. Emma tested the bottle against her wrist. Noah drank hungrily. The relief on her face was immediate. Alexander noticed. "You were rationing," he said quietly. Emma didn't answer. She didn't need to. He looked away briefly. Ashamed. Not for her. For himself. That unsettled Emma more than arrogance would have. Alexander moved toward the kitchen counter slowly. His eyes landed on the stack of bills. Hospital statements. Collection notices. Past due reminders. Emma immediately stepped forward. "Don't." He looked at her. "I wasn't judging." "That's worse." The words came out sharp. Emma rubbed her forehead tiredly. "I don't need pity." Alexander's voice stayed calm. "I know." "Do you?" "Yes." He looked around the apartment again. "You need stability." Emma laughed bitterly. "Great. I'll pick some up tomorrow after work." "You're angry." "Of course I'm angry." Noah whimpered softly. Emma lowered her voice immediately. "I did everything right," she whispered harshly. "I worked. I saved. I planned. Then one merger happened, and suddenly I couldn't breathe financially anymore." Alexander absorbed every word. "My son got sick, and I started choosing between medication and utilities." Her voice cracked. "You know what survival does to people? It makes them tired all the time. Tired in their bones." Alexander looked devastated, and Emma hated herself for noticing. Because some selfish part of her wanted him to feel it. Wanted someone powerful to finally see what their decisions did to ordinary people. He stepped closer carefully. "I can help." Emma immediately shook her head. "No, Emma. No," her eyes filled unexpectedly. "If you fix everything with money, then this just becomes another story about a rich man rescuing a poor woman." Alexander stopped. The silence stretched. Then quietly, "What if I'm trying to repair something instead?" Emma looked at him, and for the first time all night, she believed he meant it. The next morning, Emma woke on the couch with a stiff neck and Noah curled against her chest. Gray light filtered weakly through the blinds. Rain still tapped softly outside. For one disoriented second, she thought the previous night had been a stressed dream. Then she saw the paper bag on the counter. Formula, medicine, diapers, all paid for. Emma sat up slowly. Her phone buzzed. A message from Alexander. "How's Noah this morning?" She stared at it too long. Then typed. "Fever's lower." 3 dots appeared. "Good." Another pause. Then, "You mentioned daycare. Are you working today?" Emma sighed. A breakfast shift at a diner downtown. 6 hours on swollen feet, pretending exhaustion wasn't visible. "Yes," she muttered. She typed, "Double shift." Alexander responded almost immediately. "You shouldn't leave him if he's still sick." Emma closed her eyes. There it was. The impossible math of motherhood. Stay home and lose income. Go to work and feel guilty. "I don't have a choice," she typed. Several seconds passed. Then, "Actually, you might." Emma frowned. Another message arrived. "I spoke with someone in HR this morning. There's a temporary accounts reconciliation position opening at Hayes Medical." Emma stared at the screen. "Absolutely not." She typed immediately. "No, you haven't heard the details. I don't want charity." "It isn't charity." Emma laughed softly to herself. Billionaires always called rescue opportunities something else. Consulting, networking, assistance. But Alexander's next message stopped her. "You were wrongfully terminated during a restructuring review. Your file should never have been approved." Emma froze. "Then what?" "I looked into it after leaving your apartment." Her stomach tightened. She suddenly felt exposed. "You investigated me?" she typed. "I investigated my company." Emma stared at the words. "The post-maternity protections in your division weren't properly reviewed during acquisition consolidation. Someone signed off on accelerated workforce reductions." Her chest tightened painfully. "So what?" The answer came slower. So your layoff helped increase quarterly earnings enough for shareholders to applaud me publicly while you struggled privately. Emma looked away from the phone. The honesty felt brutal. Too brutal. Her eyes burned suddenly. She remembered crying silently in her bathroom after losing the job. Remembered holding Noah while calculating how many diapers she could afford. Remembered selling her grandmother's necklace to pay utility bills. Operational efficiency. Alexander sent another message. I can't undo what happened, but I'd like to try making part of it right. Emma didn't answer for several minutes. Then finally, temporary position only. His response came immediately. Fair. Hayes Medical Systems occupied 40 floors of polished glass and steel overlooking downtown. Emma nearly turned around 3 separate times before reaching security. Everything about the building screamed money. Marble floors. Quiet elevators. Employees dressed in tailored neutrals carrying expensive coffee. Emma wore her cleanest blouse and the only blazer she still owned. The sleeves were slightly frayed. She hoped nobody noticed. The receptionist smiled professionally. Ms. Carter? Mr. Hayes asked that you be sent directly upstairs. Emma's stomach twisted. Of course he did. The private elevator ride felt surreal. She caught her reflection in mirrored walls. Tired eyes. Concealer failing to hide exhaustion. A woman surviving. Not thriving. The elevator opened onto the executive floor. Everything was quiet. Controlled. A brunette assistant stood immediately. Ms. Carter. I'm Valerie. Her smile was polite but curious. Emma wondered what story Alexander had given his staff. Wrong number rescue? Desperate single mother? Public redemption project? Valerie gestured toward the office. He's finishing a call. Emma stepped inside carefully. Alexander stood near the massive windows speaking into a headset. His posture was rigid, controlled, but his voice carried an edge. No, I don't care what legal approved. She should never have been included in workforce reduction under those circumstances. Silence. Then colder. People are not line items, David. Emma froze. Alexander turned slightly. His eyes met hers. Something in his expression softened instantly. He ended the call. Emma. She stood awkwardly near the doorway. You didn't have to yell at someone because of me. Yes, he said quietly. I did. The office overlooked the city. Through floor-to-ceiling windows. Emma felt strangely irritated by the beauty of it. How could one man possess this much space while she worried about grocery receipts? Alexander noticed her staring. I know, he said. Emma blinked. What? The inequality. She looked away quickly. I didn't say anything. You didn't need to. He motioned toward the seating area. You'll report to accounting compliance temporarily. Flexible hours. Hybrid schedule. Emma frowned. Why flexible? So you can care for Noah. The immediate practicality caught her off guard. Not romantic. Not performative. Useful. Alexander handed her a folder. You're qualified for the position. Emma scanned the paperwork. The salary nearly made her dizzy. You're overpaying. No, yes you are. You were underpaid before. She looked up sharply. Alexander leaned against the desk. You know what bothered me most after seeing your file? He asked. Emma stayed quiet. You had excellent performance reviews. Perfect attendance before maternity leave. 0 disciplinary issues. His jaw tightened. Then one difficult year happened, and the system treated you as disposable. Emma swallowed hard. Because that was exactly how it had felt. Disposable. Alexander looked tired suddenly. My mother used to say poverty punishes people for needing rest. Emma stared at him. The sentence landed too close to home. She looked down at the paperwork quickly before emotion embarrassed her. I'm not forgiving your company because of one job offer. I wouldn't trust you if you did. That answer unsettled her again. He never defended himself the way powerful men usually did. He listened, and that somehow made him harder to hate. The next several weeks settled into an uneasy rhythm. Emma worked remotely 3 days each week while Noah recovered slowly from recurring respiratory infections. Alexander checked in too often. Not aggressively. Quietly. Did Noah keep dinner down tonight? You forgot your scarf in conference room B. There's a pediatric specialist I trust if you ever want a second opinion. Emma resisted every inch of dependence. She kept conversations professional, brief, controlled. But Alexander noticed. Things. The way she skipped lunch on busy days. The way she stretched leftovers across 3 meals. The way she apologized constantly whenever Noah cried during video calls. One evening, after most employees had left, Emma remained in a conference room correcting reconciliation reports while Noah slept in a portable carrier beside her. Daycare had closed unexpectedly. Again, Alexander found her there around 8. "You're still here." Emma rubbed her eyes. "Deadline tomorrow." He glanced toward Noah. "And him?" "He fell asleep after screaming for an hour." Alexander approached carefully. Noah's tiny fist curled against the blanket. His breathing sounded congested. Emma noticed Alexander studying him. "You don't have to look worried every time he coughs," she said softly. Alexander stayed quiet. Then finally, "My younger sister died from pneumonia when she was 2. Emma froze. He rarely volunteered personal details. Alexander kept his eyes on the sleeping baby. "My mother delayed taking her to the hospital because she was afraid of the bill." The room suddenly felt painfully still. Emma's chest tightened. "She blamed herself forever," he added quietly. Now she understood. The urgency, the attentiveness, the fear every time Noah sounded sick. Alexander wasn't rescuing Emma. He was trying to save a version of his past he never survived emotionally. Emma looked at him differently after that. Not softer, but deeper. People were always more complicated than the headlines written about them. Noah stirred weakly. Emma moved immediately. Alexander watched her gently bounce the baby against her shoulder. "You're good at that," he said. "Tired. At loving someone despite exhaustion." The words hit unexpectedly hard. Emma looked away. "Nobody congratulates mothers for surviving," she said quietly. "They just expect it." Alexander leaned against the table. "I think survival deserves recognition." She laughed softly. "You'd be surprised how invisible single mothers become." "I'm beginning to understand that." Emma studied him carefully. "Why are you really doing this?" Alexander met her eyes. "Which part?" "All of it." He hesitated. Then honesty again. "Because I built a company that hurt people while convincing myself I was helping them." Emma stared at him. "And because when you texted me that night," he stopped. "What?" "You sounded exactly like my mother used to." The confession cracked something open quietly between them. Not romance. Recognition. Two exhausted people carrying grief differently. The scandal broke 3 days later. Emma arrived at work to find whispers spreading across the compliance floor. Phones. News alerts. Tension. Valerie intercepted her near the elevators. Conference room. Now. Emma's stomach dropped. Inside the room, Alexander stood near the television screen while several executives argued in low, furious voices. A financial investigation article filled the screen. Hayes Medical accused of illegal post-maternity terminations during acquisition consolidations. Emma went cold. Alexander looked exhausted. "Someone leaked internal workforce review documents," Valerie explained quietly. Emma stared at the screen. Several women were listed anonymously. One of the cases sounded terrifyingly familiar. Maternity leave, termination, insurance loss, medical debt. Alexander noticed Emma's expression immediately. "It wasn't you." She looked offended. "No, I know." He rubbed his forehead. "I had to ask." One executive snapped sharply. "This could destroy investor confidence." Alexander's expression hardened instantly. "Women lost healthcare coverage after childbirth, Richard. That's not what shareholders will focus on." Emma felt physically ill. There it was. The machine. The exact system she hated. Numbers before people. Alexander looked ready to explode. Then his gaze shifted briefly toward Emma, and she saw something else. Shame. Real shame. Not public relations damage. Moral damage. He dismissed the executives abruptly. The room emptied slowly. Emma grabbed her bag. "I should go." Alexander looked up sharply. "You didn't do anything wrong. Your company did." His silence confirmed it. Emma swallowed hard. "My son almost lost health coverage because of your restructuring." Alexander closed his eyes briefly. "I know." "No, I don't think you do." Emotion finally cracked through her restraint. "I sat in an emergency room at 3 in the morning praying Noah could breathe while calculating whether I could afford another specialist." Alexander looked devastated. "And now suddenly I'm in your office drinking expensive coffee while you apologize?" "Emma, it doesn't erase what happened." "I know. You keep saying that." Her eyes filled. "But people like you survive mistakes. People like me drown in them." Alexander stood very still. Then quietly, "You're right." The answer disarmed her instantly. No defense. No excuses. Just truth. Emma looked away quickly, because part of her had wanted to hate him cleanly. And guilt complicated everything. For nearly a week afterward, Emma kept interactions strictly professional. Alexander respected the distance. Too much, maybe. His messages stopped. The quiet bothered her more than expected. One rainy Thursday evening, Noah's fever spiked again. Emma sat alone in urgent care beneath fluorescent lights while Noah cried weakly against her shoulder. Children coughed. Television news murmured overhead. A tired nurse handed Emma another clipboard. Insurance information changed? Emma nodded. The nurse sighed sympathetically. We'll need updated authorization. Of course. Always paperwork. Always waiting. Emma's hands shook from exhaustion. Noah cried harder. And before she realized what she was doing, she texted Alexander. He can't stop coughing. The response came immediately. Which hospital? Emma closed her eyes. 25 minutes later, Alexander appeared carrying coffee and a stuffed elephant. Noah stopped crying almost instantly when Alexander crouched carefully beside the chair. You remembered him liking elephants, Emma said quietly. Alexander shrugged lightly. You mentioned it once. That nearly broke her. Because Aaron never remembered things. Not appointments. Not medications. Not Noah's favorite toy. Alexander sat beside her while nurses moved around them. No dramatic speeches. No savior complex. Just presence. At one point, Emma rested her forehead briefly against the wall. I'm so tired, she whispered. Alexander looked at her. Not the polished version she showed coworkers. The real one. Bone-deep exhausted. You don't have to keep pretending you're okay around me, he said softly. Emma laughed weakly. I don't know how to stop. The doctor eventually diagnosed another respiratory infection. Not severe, but monitoring required. Medication adjustments. Follow-up appointments. More costs. Emma stared numbly at the paperwork afterward. Alexander watched her carefully. You're calculating again. What? The bills. Emma looked away. It never stops. Alexander leaned back slowly. My father used to say poverty trains people to expect disaster. Emma blinked. You talk about money like someone who remembers not having it. I do remember. Then why become this? Alexander looked around the waiting room. The fluorescent lights. The exhausted parents. The frightened children. Because I thought power would protect people. A pause. Instead, sometimes it distances you from them. Emma studied him carefully. For the first time, she saw loneliness in him. Real loneliness. Not solitude. Isolation. The kind successful people developed when everyone treated them like symbols instead of human beings. She suddenly understood why he kept showing up. Not only because of guilt, because he was lonely too. Winter settled slowly over the city. Noah improved. Emma stabilized financially for the first time in nearly a year. Not magically. Bills still existed. Stress still lingered. But survival no longer felt one emergency away from collapse. And somehow, quietly, Alexander became part of their routine. Saturday breakfasts. Pediatric appointments. Late-night conversations after Noah fell asleep. Sometimes they argued. Often, Emma challenged him constantly. About healthcare. Corporate greed. Executive detachment. Alexander listened. Sometimes defensively. Sometimes painfully. But he listened. And slowly, changes began appearing inside Hayes Medical. Extended maternity protections. Emergency childcare assistance. Medical hardship funds. Not enough. Never enough. But real. One evening, Emma stood in Alexander's office watching snow fall beyond the windows. You changed company policy because of me. Alexander shook his head. No, she looked at him skeptically. You reminded me what policies. Due to actual people. Emma folded her arms. You know what scares me? What? That I'm starting to trust you. Alexander became very still. You don't have to. That's the problem. Silence stretched quietly. Emma looked toward the city lights. I used to think powerful men only helped when they wanted something. Alexander's expression darkened slightly. Some do. And you? He answered honestly. I wanted redemption at first. Emma looked at him. At first, Alexander hesitated. Then quietly. Now I just want you to stop looking so tired all the time. The tenderness in the statement hurt. Because it wasn't grand. It wasn't fantasy. It was attention. Care. The simple, devastating intimacy of being noticed. Emma's eyes burned unexpectedly. She looked away quickly. Alexander stepped closer carefully. Not touching. Never assuming. I know I can't erase what happened, he said softly. You can't. I know. But, she swallowed hard. You stayed. His expression shifted slightly. Like the words mattered more than she intended. Most people left eventually. Especially when struggle became inconvenient. Alexander didn't. And maybe that was the beginning of healing. Not rescue. Not fantasy. Just two damaged people learning how to sit beside each other without looking away. 3 months later, Emma stood outside Noah's daycare holding a paper snowflake he'd made badly and proudly. The evening air smelled like cold pavement and distant coffee. Across the street, Alexander leaned against his car waiting. No dramatic entrance. No security team. Just a tired man loosening his tie after work. Noah spotted him first. Alex. The little boy ran clumsily across the sidewalk while Emma's heart jumped into her throat. Alexander immediately crouched and caught him safely. "You're getting faster," he told Noah seriously. Noah giggled. Emma walked toward them slowly and suddenly remembered the first night. Rain. Formula. Fear. A wrong number. She had thought her life was collapsing. Maybe parts of it had. But sometimes collapse made room for truth. Alexander looked up at her. "You okay?" Emma considered the question carefully. Really carefully. The way exhausted people did. "I think," she said slowly, "I'm finally breathing again." Something warm crossed his face. Not triumph. Relief. Noah tugged Alexander's sleeve. "Can we get soup?" Alexander glanced at Emma first. Always checking. Always asking silently. Emma nodded. "Soup sounds good." They started walking together beneath the glow of winter streetlights. Not fixed. Not healed completely. Emma still carried fear. Alexander still carried guilt. The world outside still remained unequal and exhausting and unfair. But now, when life became heavy, neither of them carried it entirely alone anymore. And for two people who had spent years surviving loneliness quietly, that small change felt almost extraordinary. Not magic. Not a fairy tale. Just hope. Slow. Earned. Human.